Uh, Thank you very much, Mr. Noguchi, for the presentation. We now understand how many stakeholders and organizations are involved in the mass discussion, including the IMO, IHO, and IALA. And he's one of the top experts who can cover the engagements of different organizations. Thank you very much. That looking at the time, I would wish to go straight into the Q&A session, and I would wish to take up the questions all together, including those directed to Mr. Noguchi. And Leanne will also join us for the Q&A session. And I would apologize for not being able to take up any of the online questions. So I wish each of the speakers to take up one of their online questions which they think is most important from their point of view. And of course, please read the question that you'll be taking up and respond to those questions. May I ask Commander to take the first the response to the question directed to you, please.
Thank you, Admiral Y. So looking at the questions, the one that I was going to take up, it says, so we know that the U.S. Coast Guard has already made and established rules for cybersecurity for manned ships. Could you tell us about the latest improvements for unmanned ships, mainly for foreign mass visiting the U.S.? It's an excellent question. So just to touch very briefly, the first part of the question, which does note that the Coast Guard already has established cyber protocols for foreign vessels. So two instruments are in play there. One, IMO resolution MSC 42898. That's Maritime Cyber Risk Management and Safety Management Systems, or SMS. That document basically affirms that SMS should take into account cyber risk management, and it encourages administrations to ensure that cyber risks are appropriately addressed in the SMS by the first annual verification of the company's document of compliance after the 1st of January 2021. So that's the first thing. In response to that, the Coast Guard issued a cyber risk management work instruction that basically operationalizes that and makes clear that companies that have foreign flag vessels that are calling on U.S. ports must ensure cyber risk management, or should ensure it's appropriately addressed in their safety management systems by that date. So yes, that is addressed for foreign vessels coming to the United States. But the question, I think, is asking about cyber risk management specifically for mass. The framework that we address any request for a mass to operate really starts with the captain of the port. So irrespective of the cyber risks, if someone wants to operate a mass within that captain of the port zone, they will approach the Coast Guard and propose a plan for how those operations, which are obviously not typical operations. I've already discussed earlier some of the issues with COLREG's compliance. So this would not be a routine type of operation. This would be a specific request to the captain of the port, describing in detail the intended area of operation, the vessel characteristics, whether the vessel would be operated complete with personnel on board in that kind of supervisory role that I discussed earlier, or in a purely remote operation. And then that plan would have to address a number of the risks. So navigational risks, redundancies if there's an engineering casualty, and within those scope of risks, there would also have to be addressed a plan for cyber intrusions, cyber risks, essentially going back to that same plan for redundancy in the event of an incident. So not your typical operation, but again, in the communications that operator has with the captain of the port, they would need to make very clear what their intended operations were, including cyber risk mitigation. So hope that answers your question. It's an excellent point.
Thank you very much, Commander. And may I ask Dr. Petrick to see whether if there is any question that can be best answered by you, please.
Thank you very much. Yes, there is indeed a question. The question goes that a virtual visit and inspection may facilitate criminals, and that it may not be sufficient to just have a virtual rather than a physical visit. Well, let me maybe start by saying that mass provides criminals with a huge advantage, and I guess we can hardly compensate that advantage they have. They have a lesser advantage of being injured or killed during a criminal endeavor. The risk to be arrested is smaller, and attribution is more difficult. So definitely a huge advantage for criminals. Then as regards mass, which are of a certain size and are subject to IMO regulations, they will be required to have certificates and to be able to communicate with authorities. So I guess virtual visit and search is the only viable option. And of course, it's not a silver bullet. It will not solve all problems, but a physical boarding is just operationally difficult, but also if there is no one on board, what do you do if you're on board? And even for traditional ships, I would assume that the future is a virtual visit, because already today, if you board a ship with 20,000 containers, you cannot conduct a search at sea. That's not possible. So the only thing you could maybe do is inspect documents relating to the cargo. So you could also do that remotely. Also, the argument goes that e-certificates cannot be forged as easily as physical documents if you use technologies such as blockchain, etc. And I guess, as you mentioned before, e-navigation is maybe the trend, and there will also be a transition in the realm of traditional ships. So virtual visit and search is just one component, and I guess the flag state will have a very important role in the future when it comes to the enforcement of maritime crimes. You used that nice concept of shoreside management paradigm, and I would say we would have a shoreside enforcement paradigm, because you have a crime at sea, but the one who commits the crime is sitting on shore. So that kind of upsets the entire enforcement concept. And I guess we need to reflect well on how we can compensate for it. And I guess it's really key that the operator sits on the territory of the flag state, because the only jurisdictional basis which is of equal value and or gives you the same enforcement powers as the flag state principle is the territoriality principle. All other principles will not give you the same power. So I guess we really need to consider that as a whole in order not to have a huge enforcement gaps. As already factually speaking, perpetrators will have a huge advantage by using unmanned ships.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Anna, for your very detailed response. And Mr. Noguchi, do you recognize the text chat question directed to you?
Yes, thank you. That's one of the questions come from the Liberia, that in the future, if for fully autonomous vessel, we now have a message to buy more human machine readable stage, or like a text or a voice or some communication. But if in the fully autonomous vessels, we need to some kind of the more machine readable messages. Of course, we need to have a machine readable message, and especially maybe I would like to introduce some of the work with the IHO. Now IHO has a S100 ECDIS series. It's a more digitalized electronic chart for using more internet-based and machine readable stages. So I think it's for technological sites, digitalizing every information and the systems much easier. But the problem is how make this digitalized information to machine-human interfaces, to symbols or others to humans. So that even in a fully autonomous ships coming, that as I say, that there are still many conventional ships. So we need to send such information like navigational warning services or meteorological warning service to both fully autonomous ships and also still conventional ships for machine, human readable way, and also machine readable way for autonomous ships. But maybe one thing's important thing is that is it fully autonomous vessel, as Mr. Rodos explained, that we or maybe need to require some responsible people for that autonomous ships that don't see the fully autonomous. So I'm not sure that if fully autonomous coming, but as a shore authority, more important things is we need to provide our such important information for both human readable way, but also machine readable way. That I think we really need. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ms. Noguchi. As we have some 10 more minutes, I will pick up one of the online questions, and if still the time allows us to do so, I would ask the floor for one more question. So I see one chat question saying, how and when do you think that mass advances will be implemented by developing countries? So this is a highly, very important, but highly complex, difficult to answer question. This is not a matter of use. If anybody who venture to respond to this, the difficult question. Yes, Dr. Petruk, please.
Yes, I have not an answer to the entire question, but what I can observe in discussions in relation to mass, that other kind of states become important in the context of mass. For instance, you have the Scandinavian states or Japan, South Korea, who have invested a lot of resources in the development of these systems. So they potentially become important flag states for this new type of vessels, whereas this would maybe disturb the current balance in terms of which are the major states in terms of flag states, but also, of course, the interests of labor supplying states like India for officers, or the Philippines who are the main suppliers of crew. Of course, they have different interests in the context of mass. And if you follow the debate within IMOs, you can observe that there are different states with different interests. And I guess it's not an either or. As you mentioned before, it will take a long time until we have mainly fully autonomous or remotely controlled or whatever type of mass. And for a long time, there will be a coexistence between these two types of ships.
Yes, thank you, Doctor. It's a very nice high-level comment, but this is a very important point we will need to continuously consider as we go along with the mass development. So I think we can take up one more question if there is anything from the floor. I think the Captain Maramoto took the first one.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Osam from one of the intergovernmental consultative organization located in London. I don't, well, this is not specifically directed to any individual expert here in the panel, but I'm just wondering, we are, I mean, having attended the last 2 days of these discussions, and for me at least, it is becoming more and more clear that in terms of the degree that of autonomy that we are talking about, degree 4 is very, very difficult. And it is interesting to note, and it's quite encouraging to note from all around the world that the development and research and development are indeed progressing. But in terms of fully autonomous ships, allowing the machine or the objects who start to have a will to navigate the ocean, or indeed the coastal water, where you see the heavy concentration of fishing and vessels, fishing vessels, engaging whatever, behaving whatever they like to do at sea. And having said that, I mean, I'm just wondering if there's any national consideration started in any of the countries, perhaps to bring the possible proposal to the IMO or any intergovernmental body to consider perhaps the separation of consideration of degree 4 vessels from the entire discussion in order to progress and quickly achieve the ambitious target of the adoption of the non-mandatory mass code to be adopted next year. How many sessions, how many hours do you have? That's very, very, well, we know how difficult it is. And if you separate this, it may perhaps make it more realistic to progress. I'm not saying forget about degree 4 now. It will definitely require further in-depth discussion. But by separating it and put degree 4 in abeyance for now, you may be able to achieve the ambitious target more quickly. We need more in-depth discussion. I understand that there is some well, time constraint. I don't want to delay this any further, but this is just out of interest as an individual. I'm not asking this as a particular institution, if perhaps interest. Thank you.
Liam, please.
Very interesting question that we've had ourselves, I think, within the UK and within the discussions that I've seen within the mass correspondence group. We've been very careful around the degrees of autonomy. And it's been said within the IMO that the degrees of autonomy were actually focused for the RSE, for the regulatory scoping exercise. So the work going forward is being very careful around these degrees of autonomy. I think what we have going for us is a goal-based approach, where we're looking at this is what this ship or piece of equipment or body needs to do. And that's not tied into any degree of autonomy. It's ensuring that whatever's in front of us, with whatever capability it has, meets the safety requirement that is set. So I think at this stage, that's the best we can say. And I'm mindful, and we're mindful in the UK when we're looking at our regulations, to make sure that we're not limiting the scope. And that's why we at the moment are not mentioning degrees of autonomy. We're just mentioning autonomous vessels and what they need to do to be safe. So how autonomous they are doesn't matter at the moment. It will get more tricky, and we're trying not to limit ourselves, and we're trying to, I think, as a colleague said earlier, it's hard to imagine where these things are going, and we can't put today's thinking on what we hope is going to happen in the future. So I think keeping it broad, going goal-based, and trying to not deny the levels of autonomy, but not be tied to those 4 degrees that were introduced for a very specific purpose for the regulatory scoping exercise. So I think that's what our position in the UK is, and how we're trying to address this. It's not a perfect answer, but I think with our understanding of the technology today, it's where we are.
Thank you, Leanne. This was also a very productive interchange. Thank you very much. I have, maybe I can take up one more question, but very briefly, please.
First of all, thank you, expert of the panel, for the valuable presentation. I'm JJ Lu from the Marine Department of Hong Kong, China. I have one question for Dr. Anna Pitrick. From the presentation today, I learned that the location of the mass control center is related to the enforcement jurisdiction. In this context, I'm wondering how these elements influence ship owner to choose the ship's flag. Thank you.
So the question is how that would affect the freedom of choosing a flag. Yes. Exactly. So essentially, once you choose the flag, you also choose the location of the remote operation center. And that maybe goes towards what I was saying before. I'm not sure whether the current flag states are those states who will be the flag states of mass. That's a question. Things can change, but I imagine that those countries leading on the technological development would also be the future flag states, because they would host the remote operation centers. And if we look back, the idea was initially that a ship would have a close material link with the flag state. Over the course of the time, that changed considerably, and we today have open registries where you don't have any material link between the ship or the ship owner and that territory. And this leads to a certain enforcement gap, I would say, but at least you have the suspect on board the ship, so enforcement authorities can still get hold of that person. But in case of mass, the person is not on board, so the person is in that flag state. And if that flag state is completely disinterested in the enforcement and hosts operation center because of as a business case to generate taxes and tax income, or you could charge fees, then I guess we have a problem as regards enforcing standards.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. We are right on schedule. So may I once again thank the excellent the 5 speakers for their excellent contribution to the seminar. Thank you very much. Before I give the floor back to Captain Kawai, I'd also thank the interpreters who supported the seminar with the very highly professional manner. Thank you very much, interpreters. So, Mr. Kawai, so I'll give the floor back to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Admiral. So that's a very concrete and very productive discussion. So there are indeed a lot of things to think about that. And I'll distribute the questionnaire to all of you right after this seminar. So I welcome your questions, the comments, through the questionnaire. Thank you very much. So now it's time to conclude this 2-day seminar. So I invite Mr. Akifumi Suzuki for closing remarks. So floor is yours.
Dozo.
鈴木さん、クロージングリマークお願いします。
はい。よろしいでしょうか。
はい、お願いします。
はい。はい、わかりました。